You've lived a great life and done well for yourself. But what mark will you leave on the world? How will you inspire future generations? Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand have helped thousands of people answer exactly those questions. If you've ever wondered, what will be my legacy? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Stan and Katie Beth.
Hey everyone, this is Stephen Ting, your host of Legacy Stories podcast, and I'm really excited today to be introducing Christina Lewis. Christina is an attorney at law office of Christina Lewis here in Torrance, California. She practices in the areas of estate planning, asset preservation, and protection, as well as business law. She has a focus on helping high net worth individuals, specifically with the corporate practice or corporate laws. Her background is in the corporate corporate
transaction.
corporate. That's right. Yes. And she advises fiduciaries in regards to administration and trusts and estates. Ms. Lewis also earned her undergraduate degree from the University of California, Los Angeles, and she's earned her JD degree from the Loyola Law School. Christina, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. Well, just to get going, wanted to maybe learn a little bit about your background and why you chose to go to law school to begin with.
Certainly, I think what was interesting was, there's sort of a little joke about a lot of lawyers, and I might be under one of those, which is I didn't do so well in organic chemistry. So, my original intention, when I was undergraduate at UCLA was a little bit of possibly pursuing a medical degree. And as I got along in the, primary requisites to pursue that, I realized maybe this medical degree may not be as great as I thought it would be. And I realized too, actually, I had taken some other courses that included law, funny enough, that kind of piqued my interest more so than the organic chemistry did. So that's kind of not necessarily default, but I mean, as much as I joke about it, I really did enjoy the actual law, my exposure to law when I was in undergrad. And that's what made me continue to pursue it later on.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that. My organic chemistry didn't turn out so well either, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners probably can relate to that. But yeah, it sounds like you made a great choice. But why estate planning?
So my background, originally, I was with a big law firm in Los Angeles, and at some point had to decide when I had children whether to pursue continuing in the big law. It was corporate transactional, where back then, and even now there still is a little bit of that, but they're a little bit more tolerant. Back then, working 80-hour work weeks was very common, and it was almost expected of you. And so I had to make a decision of whether, when it came time to choose a career or have my kids know who their mom was and not call their nanny mommy, it was a very simple decision. Kind of starting my own practice was a key point to it, that flexibility. Again, the beauty of what has recently happened with COVID and being able to sort of work from home has also, I think, allowed a lot of women practitioners to become both, practitioners as lawyers and as mothers too in this day and age. For me, how I kind of transitioned into estate planning was I started my practice originally on the corporate side and referred quite a bit of high net worth individuals. Funny enough, you meet these very intelligent individuals that have done very well financially in the business world. And then you recognize their own personal financial life might not be exactly in order. And what I mean by that is nothing is in a trust. And so should anything happen to them, you can imagine probate, right? So I ended up referring quite a bit of business to different attorneys. And it was actually my luck that one attorney who finally approached me said, you're really referring me a lot of business, and I feel like you would do well in this field. It's not complex, at least the basic estate planning to begin with, when I first started. And that's kind of how I stumbled into estate planning.
Yeah, so it sounds like stumbling is the word there, but it sometimes that's the best way to find your passion, right?
Yeah.
Really what you're good at and what you really enjoy doing. Um, and I'm glad you spoke to a little bit about how you started your own firm and your own practice and what that all means to you. A lot of times it's coming from the corporate world, being able to transition and then balance family. All of that is such a big deal, right? Especially after COVID too. Who would you say is your ideal client?
My, as much as I say that a lot of my clients are high net worth individuals, I always
Mhm.
tell people that's not to say I don't have that client who has a very modest estate that has maybe a primary home, very good retirement assets, a few bank accounts, a brokerage account. What is more important to me is a client who values what I do. So it is not necessarily the value of the client's estate, but rather the client valuing my services.
Right. Okay. And how would you say these clients normally, or how would they find you? How do they find you?
About 90, believe it or not, 90% of my clients are referred to me, either by other attorneys in different fields
Hmm.
or financial advisors, CPAs, bankers, all of those types of people. And how they've found me is because I've actually had worked with clients where I've taken very good care of clients, then reached out to those bankers and said, hey, look, I'm doing your client's estate plan. We need to make sure that everything's properly funded. And I take care of everything. And they see the detail that I pay attention to that client, that then they realize if I refer this attorney to their client, it makes them look good as well.
Right. Yeah. And along those lines, what would you say are some common issues you generally help with?
So I get a lot of clients in this day and age. It's very, very simple and it's very tempting to, as I call it, the steak dinner trust. Where it's come and learn all about estate planning
Hmm.
and get sort of a very, I don't want to use the word boilerplate, but a lot of times that's what it is. And I'll have a client come to me after they've done one of those and say, I now need an amendment. And I will ask them, like, well, why aren't you going back to that previous firm that did the work? And they said, well, you know, we felt they did a good job, but now when we need them to do something or when we call them, we just don't get any callbacks. And I
Hmm.
kind of tell people, the thing about law is at the end of the day, too, it's still a little bit of a business and their time is money. So they've banked an amount of time. And if they have spent any more time, they're going to bill you for it, unfortunately.
Right.
Um, I take care of my clients. And as I said, it is you get what you pay for. And a lot of the times when these clients do come to me, yes, the previous firm did their job by funding that piece of property into their trust, but that's it. Nothing else was funded. Nobody explained to them the importance of liquidity in a trust and why you shouldn't just do a benefited designated beneficiary to your heirs instead of to the trust or naming the trust itself, owning the bank accounts. Those are all things that I take the time to explain to clients. And then I make sure that everything is truly completely wrapped up to the point where when I do even take care of their home to put into
Mhm.
the trust, I reach out to their insurance agent and say, hey, make sure we add the trust as an additional insured.
Wow.
So we go even one step further than most firms do in general. And then, like I said, that's how then I've got the insurance agent reaching out to me and referring clients, right? Because they see the diligence that I put into my clients and the effort and the attention.
Yeah, that I mean that speaks volumes, that extra mile. And I mean, to be honest with you, I don't see a lot of practices that go that distance. But they certainly, you nailed it. I mean, those are some very big issues that a lot of clients, whether it's big or small, right? High net worth, or you said the modest estates, these are all very common issues. So yeah, that really sets your practice apart, I think.
Well,
Um,
especially on the, I've got to tell you, especially right now on the home insurance and in California as well.
Hmm.
Insurance is extremely difficult right now to obtain when you buy a house in the insurance market.
Hmm.
And how I got into this practice of basically making sure that the trust is also added on as an additional insured was because a fiduciary had shared with me years ago that once the trust becomes irrevocable and if it's not been insured, the insurance company will not add the trust later on.
I see. Wow.
So, you do not want that client in that position.
Right. Yeah, what a mess to unravel.
Mhm.
What would you say are some common misconceptions in your field?
Uh, so I think part of the things that people think about is that an estate plan is a one size fits all.
Hmm.
And it is far from that. And I get a lot of calls that say, no, no, but my estate plan's really simple. So, but the more that I talk to a client, the more that I then make them realize like it really is its own unique fingerprint. Every estate plan, not one single of my estate plans can you ever say they are alike. That's how we focus. And again, I always tell clients sometimes I may not be the right attorney, but I always make sure if I'm not, that I refer them to the right person.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of different misconceptions. The one size fits all is definitely something I've heard of. Um, but yeah, it's a good thing that you address those types of things. Can you tell us maybe tell us a story of a case gone wrong, right? Maybe a horror story that you've seen in your experience or in your working with certain clients, whether it's a high net worth client, right? Maybe something that's um, something our listeners can avoid.
I think, the most important thing is, any time you own a home in California, you kind of have to do that basic trust, right? And you start from there and then you
Mhm.
figure out what else you need. So if you are a young parent, you are going to have to also think about talking to people. So you want to talk about common, mistakes. I get a lot of clients. This is the other thing, right? I counsel. You end up, that's what an attorney is, right? There's another synonym for us. We're counsel,
Right.
right? So we need to also remember we have to counsel on certain things. So sometimes I've actually have had to specifically ask, especially for young parents who designated guardians for their kids. Have you spoken to these guardians? Do they know they're going to be guardians? Because I've also been on the other end of it, right? Where unfortunately the parents have passed away and the people who were, nominated guardians had no clue, had no idea.
Hmm.
And the last thing we want to do is to have a group of people who weren't prepared, nor do they want to be the guardians. And we have to go to court in order to find out who's next in line to take these children.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that hits home for a lot of folks. I can think of examples of people that were named guardians that did not know they were guardians. So yeah, I think you've nailed it. Um, can you think of an example that you've maybe personally were involved with of a story that's gone right? A situation where you were able to put together a good solution. You mentioned a very tailored solution, for example. Just maybe a story that's gone right.
I think the beauty of why I really enjoy estate planning, part of my practice is still corporate transactional, but the word transactional, right? It means kind of one and done a lot of times.
Mhm.
Estate planning, if you're doing it right, and my firm does both the estate planning, the trust administration, probate if needed for those who did not plan appropriately. Those are all things that if you've done it right, the client will come back to you. And I've had situations where the clients have come to me for their estate plan and they've now reached out to me once their parent has passed away and have literally said, my parents passed away. And I've had actually, it's really interesting because everybody grieves differently. I'm flattered when I am one of the first calls. I've actually had a call that was as short as literally, oh, my mom passed away. And I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry. And they're like, and I was like, when did she pass away? 3 hours ago. And I'm like, okay, let's, you don't have to do the trust administration right now. And she's like, oh, well, my mom told me. I'm like, I understand, but let's give some time to grieve. There is a little bit of, we have to take that step back. And I'm flattered that I'm one of their first calls because I'm close to the family, or they feel like I should, am one of the first calls. But that's that relationship, and that's the beauty of an estate planner. If you're doing it right, you are part of their lives. And I've done estate plans where they've referred me to friends and family, and it's just built upon reputation.
Right. Yeah. Uh, Again, referrals. You mentioned 90% of your business is referrals, and I can see why. I think you've paved that path very, very well. What would you say is your biggest challenge in your practice at the moment?
Um, I think as any solo practitioner, it's that juggle between the load work that you're going to be basically coming through and being able to manage it. We are not right now at this point um, in that position. We have plenty of work. So for
Mhm.
me personally, as a solo practitioner, it's a matter of whether do I consider hiring another associate? Do I merge with another firm? Do I partner with another attorney? It's a good position, I guess, to be in.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of considerations, because the beauty of also being a solo practitioner is that belief, at least for the moment right now, of being independent, right? Having that autonomy.
Yeah, that's great. I know you touched on a lot of things that you've done in your practice. What would you say is the one thing that you enjoy or you like the best about what you do?
I would have to say is I always tell my kids, which is, do I feel good about what I've done for the day when I put my head on that pillow?
Mhm.
And each and every day, I've been very fortunate enough to feel as if I've helped somebody along the way in my practice. And every day I can say that. So I don't know if there's many practices in different fields of law that allows that, but I feel as if for me personally, the estate plan sector really kind of gives that opportunity for me.
Yeah, very good. Well, can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
So I am located in Torrance, California,
Mhm.
and the best way to reach me would be either on my website. It is www.christinaLewislaw.com, which is CHRISTINALEWISLAW.com, or else you can call my office at 424-247-1154. And the second line is 424-267-6888.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina, and thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and a lot of the insight that you've shared. I think our listeners have gotten a lot out of it. Hopefully, they're able to find you when they do need to get a hold of you, and we'll also have your contact information out. So for our listeners that do want to reach out to Christina, we'll have her contact information. Everyone, thank you for joining us. This has been Stephen Ting, your host with Legacy Stories podcast. I've been here with Christina Lewis. Again, Christina, thank you for your time here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Everyone, thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Your Life, Your Legacy podcast with Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To find out more about Stan and Katie Beth, go to pinnaclelegacylaw.com. You can also find links in the show notes.